The sound of shattering glass can end more than just porcelain. It can destroy a life. When Clara Bennett's trembling hands let go of a priceless vase on Christmas Eve, she didn't just break an antique, she broke her only chance at survival. Thrown into a deadly blizzard by a man without mercy, she had minutes to live. But what she didn't know was that someone was watching, someone powerful, someone who would burn down his own world to pull her from the ice. This is the story of the night everything broke, and the war that followed. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Blackwood estate didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum where people happened to sleep. Clara Bennett had thought that the first time she'd walked through the service entrance 6 months ago, her shoes squeaking against floors so polished they could have been mirrors. She still thought it now, on Christmas Eve, as she carried a silver tray of champagne flutes through the east corridor, her reflection ghosting alongside her in the waxed marble. Everything here was perfect, untouchable, cold, just like the people who lived in it. Clara. She flinched at the sound of her name, nearly dropping the tray. Victor Hale stood at the end of the hallway, hands clasped behind his back, his gray suit pressed so sharply it could cut. The house manager. Her boss. The man who'd made the last 6 months feel like walking a tightrope in the dark. Yes, Mr. Hale? Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Her voice came, "The crystal vase in the north parlor needs to be moved to the display case before the guests arrive. Handle it yourself. Don't send one of the other girls." Clara's stomach dropped. "Sir, maybe someone with more experience should. Are you refusing?" No, Then go." He didn't raise his voice. He never did. That was the worst part. Victor Hale delivered cruelty in the same tone someone might use to comment on the weather. Clara swallowed and nodded, setting the tray down on a nearby console table. Her hands were already shaking. The north parlor sat on the second floor, overlooking the front grounds. By the time Clara reached it, her fingers were numb. Not from cold, but from nerves that had been fraying since the moment she'd woken up that morning. The vase sat on a mahogany side table near the window. It was beautiful in a way that made her afraid to look at it too long. Pale blue porcelain, hand-painted with some kind of floral pattern that probably had a fancy name she'd never heard of. It looked old, expensive, irreplaceable. Of course it was. Clara exhaled slowly and reached for it, cradling the base with both hands. It was heavier than she expected. She adjusted her grip, turning carefully toward the display case across the room. That's when she heard the shouting. It came from outside, muffled but sharp, cutting through the silence of the house. Clara's head turned instinctively toward the window, her focus breaking for just a second. Just 1 second. Her foot caught the edge of the rug. She stumbled, and the vase slipped. The sound it made hitting the floor wasn't loud. It was almost delicate, a soft crack, then the tinkling scatter of porcelain shards spreading across the hardwood like ice breaking apart. Clara stood frozen, staring down at the wreckage. Her breath had stopped. Her heart had stopped. Everything had stopped. No. What did you do? Victor's voice came from the doorway, low and venomous. Clara spun around, her hands still outstretched, useless. Mr. Hale, it was an accident. I didn't mean an accident. He stepped into the room, his eyes fixed on the shattered vase. His expression didn't change. That was somehow worse than anger. Do you have any idea what that was worth? I'm so sorry. I'll pay for it. I'll pay for it. Victor let out a breath that might have been a laugh if it had any humor in it. You make $9 an hour, Clara. That vase was worth more than you'll earn in 5 years. Her throat tightened. Please, Mr. Hale, I'll do anything. You're fired. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? No, you can't. You're terminated. Effective immediately. Victor's tone was flat, businesslike. He could have been reading a grocery list. Collect your things and leave the premises. Clara's vision blurred. It's Christmas Eve. There's a storm coming. That's not my concern. Mr. Hale, please. Her voice cracked, desperation leaking through. I don't have anywhere to go. If you just give me a chance to... You had your chance. You wasted it. He turned toward the door, already dismissing her. Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. If you're not gone by then, I'll have you removed. Please! He didn't stop, didn't even pause. Clara stood there, staring at the empty doorway, her pulse hammering so hard she thought she might pass out. Around her, the shattered vase glittered on the floor like broken stars. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something. But there wasn't time. What? 10 minutes later, Clara was standing outside the service entrance with nothing but the clothes on her back and a thin jacket that wouldn't do a damn thing against the cold. The wind hit her immediately, sharp and vicious, carrying flakes of snow that stung her face like needles. The storm had started earlier than expected. The sky was a solid sheet of gray, the kind that meant it wasn't going to let up anytime soon. Clara pulled her jacket tighter, even though it didn't help, and started walking. The Blackwood estate sat on 200 acres of private land, most of it wooded, with a single winding driveway that stretched nearly 3 miles to the main road. She'd taken a staff shuttle up it when she'd first been hired. She'd never walked it. Now she didn't have a choice. The cold sank into her bones within the first 5 minutes. Her breath came out in ragged clouds, her fingers already going numb inside her pockets. The snow was falling harder now, piling up on the driveway faster than she could have imagined. She kept moving. What else could she do? Her mind spun in circles, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Fired. On Christmas Eve. For one mistake. It wasn't fair. But fairness didn't matter. Victor Hale didn't care about fairness. He cared about control, about making sure everyone knew their place. And Clara's place, apparently, was out here, in the cold, alone. Her foot slipped on a patch of ice hidden under the snow, and she went down hard, her palms slamming into the frozen ground. Pain shot through her wrists, sharp and immediate. She bit down on a sob and forced herself back up. Keep moving, just keep moving. But her body was starting to betray her. Her legs felt heavy, sluggish. Her thoughts were getting slower, harder to hold on to. The wind howled through the trees, drowning out everything else. She didn't know how long she'd been walking. It could have been 20 minutes. It could have been an hour. The driveway stretched out ahead of her, endless and white. And then her knees buckled. Clara hit the ground again, this time without the strength to get back up. She tried. Her arms shook with the effort, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The snow was soft, almost warm, in a distant, wrong kind of way. She thought about her mother, about the apartment they'd shared before the cancer took her, about the smell of burnt toast on Sunday mornings and the sound of rain on the windows. She thought about a lot of things, and then she stopped thinking at all. Adrian Blackwood didn't like parties. He tolerated them because they were necessary. Business happened at parties. Deals were made over champagne and small talk. Alliances were formed in the spaces between polite laughter. But he didn't like them. He stood near the windows of the main hall, a glass of whiskey in his hand that he hadn't touched, watching his guests mill around like well-dressed sharks. Most of them were here because they wanted something from him. Money, influence, access. They always wanted something. Mr. Blackwood. He turned. Victor Hale stood a few feet away, his posture perfect, his expression carefully neutral. The Richardsons are asking about the merger, Victor said. I told them you'd speak with them after dinner. Adrian nodded. Fine. Victor hesitated, just for a second. There was an incident earlier. One of the staff broke an antique vase. I've handled it. Handled it how? Terminated her employment. Adrian raised an eyebrow. On Christmas Eve? She was careless. The vase was irreplaceable. So is basic human decency, apparently. Victor's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Adrian dismissed him with a wave and turned back to the window. The snow was coming down heavier now, the kind of storm that would bury the roads by morning. He drained his whiskey and set the glass down on a passing tray. An hour later, he was in his office, reviewing contracts when his phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. Footage flagged. You should see this. Adrian frowned and opened the attached video file. It was security footage from the East Corridor. Timestamp 6:47 p.m. The video showed Clara. He remembered her vaguely, one of the younger maids, carrying a tray of glasses. Then it cut to the north parlor. She was holding the vase, turning carefully. And then she stumbled. The vase fell. Adrian watched Victor enter the room, watched the conversation play out in silence. watched Clara's face crumple as Victor delivered the news, and then he watched her walk out into the storm. His hand tightened around the phone. "Where is she now?" he said aloud. The security chief's voice came through the speaker. "Unknown, sir. She left on foot approximately 90 minutes ago." But was 90 minutes. In a blizzard. On foot. Adrian was already moving before he'd made the conscious decision to do so. He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair and headed for the door, his pulse kicking up in a way it rarely did. "Sir?" The security chief sounded confused. "Do you want me to send someone?" "No." He ended the call and took the stairs two at a time. The cold hit him the second he stepped outside, brutal and immediate. The wind tore at his coat, and the snow was so thick he could barely see 10 feet ahead. Adrian didn't stop. He took one of the estate's SUVs, the engine roaring to life as he peeled down the driveway, headlights cutting through the white curtain of the storm. His mind was moving faster than the vehicle. 90 minutes. In this weather. On foot. She wouldn't make it. He pushed the thought away and focused on the road, or what he could see of it. The snow had already covered most of the driveway, turning it into a guessing game of where the pavement ended and the ditches began. His headlights swept over something dark. Adrian slammed on the brakes. The SUV skidded to a stop, and he was out of the vehicle before it had fully settled, his boots crunching through the snow. She was lying beneath a tree, half buried in white, her body curled in on itself. "Clara." No response. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands moving on instinct, checking her pulse, her breathing. Both were there, but faint. Too faint. Her skin was ice. Adrian didn't hesitate. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest, and carried her back to the SUV. She weighed almost nothing. He laid her across the back seat, cranking the heat as high as it would go, and drove back to the estate faster than he should have. The staff scattered when he walked through the door with Clara in his arms. "Get Dr. Wells, Adrian snapped at the nearest person. "Now!" He carried her upstairs to one of the guest suites, laying her down on the bed and pulling the blankets up around her. Her lips were blue, her fingers were white. Dr. Wells arrived within minutes, his medical bag in hand, his face tight with concern. "How long was she out there?" "Too long." The doctor worked quickly, checking her vitals, wrapping her in heated blankets, starting an IV. Adrian stood by the window, watching, his hands curled into fists. "She'll live," Dr. Wells said finally. "But it was close. Another 20 minutes and we'd be having a very different conversation." Adrian nodded, his jaw tight. "I'll stay with her tonight," the doctor added. "Make sure there are no complications." "Good." Adrian didn't leave. Not yet. He stood there, staring down at the girl who'd nearly died on his property, and felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Anger. Not at her. At the man who'd sent her out there. What? Victor Hale was in the staff break room when Adrian found him. The house manager looked up, startled, as Adrian stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "Mr. Blackwood, You're fired." Victor blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You're fired, effective immediately." Adrian's voice was calm, cold. "You'll be escorted off the property within the hour. If you ever set foot here again, I'll have you arrested." "Sir, I don't understand." "You sent a girl out into a blizzard to die over a vase." Victor's face went pale. "She broke—" "I don't care." "It was worth Isa." "I said, I don't care." Adrian stepped closer, his eyes locked on Victor's. "You put her life at risk over an object, over something that can be replaced, and you did it on Christmas Eve." "Mr. Blackwood, please, get out of my house." Victor opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He nodded stiffly and left without another word. Adrian stood there for a long moment, his pulse still racing, before turning and heading back upstairs. Clara was still unconscious, her breathing slow but steady. Dr. Wells sat in a chair nearby, monitoring her vitals. "She's stable," the doctor said quietly. Adrian nodded and pulled up a chair on the opposite side of the bed. He didn't know why he stayed. He just did. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, for the first time in a long time, Adrian Blackwood felt something other than cold. The first thing Clara became aware of was warmth. Not the false warmth that comes right before freezing to death. She'd read about that somewhere, how the body tricks itself at the end. This was real. Heavy blankets, heat seeping into her bones, the distant crackle of a fireplace. The second thing was pain. Her fingers throbbed. Her toes felt like they were being stabbed with hot needles. Every breath hurt, her lungs raw and burning. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt weighted down, too heavy to lift. Easy. A voice, male, unfamiliar, but somehow safe. Don't try to move yet. Clara managed to crack her eyes open. The room swam into focus slowly. High ceilings, cream-colored walls, soft lighting that didn't hurt to look at. Nothing like the cramped staff quarters she'd been living in. A man sat in a chair beside the bed. Older, maybe 60, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of face that had seen everything twice. "Where?" Clara's voice came out as a croak. "You're in one of the guest suites. I'm Dr. Wells." He leaned forward, checking something on a monitor she hadn't noticed. "You've been unconscious for about 14 hours. 14 hours. The memories came back in fragments. The vase, Victor's face, the storm, walking, falling. Cold so deep it stopped feeling like cold at all. "Mr. Blackwood found you," Dr. Wells continued, adjusting her IV. "Another 20 minutes and we'd be having a very different conversation. As it is, you're lucky. Moderate hypothermia. Some frostbite on your fingers and toes, but nothing that won't heal." Clara stared at her hands. They were wrapped in gauze, and she could barely feel them. "I need to—" She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The room tilted sideways. "You need to stay in bed." Dr. Wells's voice was firm but not unkind. "You're not going anywhere for at least 48 hours. But my job, you were fired, remember?" The words hit her like a slap. Of course. She'd been fired, thrown out, left to die. "Why am I here?" Clara asked quietly. Dr. Wells studied her for a moment. "You'd have to ask Mr. Blackwood that." As if summoned by his name, the door opened. Adrian Blackwood walked in, and Clara's breath caught despite everything. He looked different than she remembered from the few times she'd glimpsed him in the hallways. Tired. Older. There was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He stopped when he saw she was awake, something flickering across his face too fast for Clara to identify. "I'll give you two some privacy," Dr. Wells said, standing. He looked at Adrian. "She needs rest. Don't keep her up too long." Adrian nodded, and the doctor left. The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara didn't know where to look. At him? At her bandaged hands? At the IV drip that was apparently keeping her alive? "How are you feeling?" Adrian asked finally. "Like I almost died." "You did almost die." Clara met his eyes then. They were dark, unreadable, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Why did you come looking for me?" The question tumbled out before she could stop it. "Because someone needed to." That's not an answer. Adrian moved closer, pulling the chair Dr. Wells had vacated up beside the bed. When he sat down, they were at eye level. "Victor sent you out in a blizzard over a broken vase," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "That's not just cruel, that's attempted murder." He was doing his job. His job was to manage the household, not execute staff members for minor accidents. The anger in Adrian's voice surprised her. It wasn't directed at her, she could tell that much, but it was there, simmering under the surface. "I broke something expensive," Clara said. "I deserved to be fired." "You deserved a reprimand, maybe a pay doc, not a death sentence." Clara didn't know what to say to that. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, the first crack in his composed exterior. "I watched the security footage. You stumbled. The vase fell. It was an accident. You watched. I watch everything that happens in my house." He said it matter-of-factly, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "That's how I knew you were in trouble." Clara processed this. He'd been watching, had seen what happened, had come after her. "Victor's gone," Adrian continued. "I fired him. He won't set foot on this property again." "You fired him because of me." "I fired him because he's a liability and a sadist, and I should have done it months ago." Adrian's jaw tightened. What he did to you was just the final straw. Clara's head was spinning, and not just from the hypothermia. I don't understand. Why do you care? You don't even know me. I know you work 12-hour shifts without complaint. I know you were always the first one to volunteer for the worst jobs. I know you sent most of your paycheck to some address in Ohio every month. He paused. I know you didn't deserve what happened to you. The fact that he knew all of that should have been creepy, should have set off alarm bells. Instead, Clara just felt seen. For the first time in months, maybe years, someone had actually noticed her. The address in Ohio was my aunt, she said quietly. She's sick. The medical bills are... Clara stopped, not sure why she was telling him this. I know. I looked into it. Of course he did. You're going to tell me that's invasive, Adrian said, reading her expression. It is. Probably. He didn't look apologetic, but I needed to know if you had somewhere to go, someone who could take care of you. And? And your aunt's in hospice. You have no other living relatives, no savings to speak of, nowhere to go. Clara felt her throat tighten. Hearing it laid out like that made it somehow more real, more pathetic. I'm not trying to hurt you, Adrian said, his voice softer now. I'm trying to help. Why? Because I can. It was the simplest answer he could have given, and somehow the most honest. Clara looked down at her bandaged hands. What happens now? Now you recover. Dr. Wells will monitor you for the next few days, make sure there's no permanent damage. And then we'll figure it out. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she didn't need charity, didn't need some billionaire playing savior. But the truth was, she did need help. She had nothing. No job, no home, no family that could take her in. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Okay, she said finally. Adrian nodded and stood. Get some rest. We'll talk more later. He was almost to the door when Clara spoke again. Thank you for coming to get me. Adrian stopped, his hand on the doorframe. He didn't turn around. You're welcome. Then he was gone, and Clara was alone with her thoughts and the steady beep of the heart monitor. She should have been relieved, grateful, happy to be alive. Instead, she just felt lost. The next 2 days passed in a blur of sleep and medical checks and meals brought to her room by staff members who wouldn't quite meet her eyes. Clara didn't know if they'd been told what happened, but she could feel their curiosity and their judgment in equal measure. The former maid, now sleeping in a guest suite. It didn't sit right. Dr. Wells was pleased with her progress. The frostbite was healing better than expected. Her core temperature had stabilized. She could move her fingers without too much pain. You're young and healthy, he told her on the third morning. That works in your favor. When can I leave? Dr. Wells raised an eyebrow. Leave? I can't stay here forever. That's something you'd need to discuss with Mr. Blackwood. Of course it was. Adrian had visited twice since that first conversation, once to check on her recovery, once to bring her a laptop so she wouldn't be bored. Both times he'd been polite but distant, like he was checking an item off a list. Clara didn't know what to make of him. On the fourth day, Dr. Wells declared her well enough to move around, and Clara nearly cried with relief. Being confined to bed had been slowly driving her insane. She ventured out of the guest suite carefully, still wearing the pajamas someone had left for her, silk, probably worth more than her entire wardrobe had been. The hallways were quiet. Most of the staff would be working in other parts of the estate. Clara found herself drawn to the main staircase, the one she'd descended 1,000 times carrying trays and linens and whatever else needed moving. It looked different from this angle. You shouldn't be up yet. Clara spun around. Adrian stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching her. Dr. Wells said I could move around. He said you could walk to the bathroom, not tour the house. I wasn't touring. I was just... Clara gestured vaguely at the stairs. Remembering. Adrian moved closer. Remembering what? What it felt like to be invisible. The words came out more honest than she'd intended. Adrian was quiet for a moment. You were never invisible. Yes, I was. That was the point. Good servants don't get noticed. I noticed you. Clara met his eyes. Why? I don't know. And for the first time, he sounded uncertain. I just did. They stood there in the hallway, the space between them charged with something Clara couldn't name. I need to leave, she said finally. I can't stay here. It's not right. Where will you go? I'll figure it out. There are shelters, programs. I'll find something. Or you could stay. Clara shook her head. I can't be your charity case. I'm not offering charity. Adrian's voice was firm. I'm offering a job. That stopped her. What? The house needs staff. You need work. It's a simple arrangement. You can't be serious. Why not? Because Clara struggled for words. Because everyone will think I slept my way into getting my job back. Let them think what they want. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they'll be talking about. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that Clara had to tilt her head back to look at him. I don't care what they think. Do you? Yes, Clara wanted to say. She cared desperately. Cared about her reputation, about how she was perceived, about maintaining some shred of dignity. But caring didn't pay bills. What kind of job? She asked instead. Whatever you want, kitchen staff, housekeeping, administrative work if you're interested. I don't have administrative experience. You're smart. You'll learn. Clara stared at him. Why are you doing this? I told you. No. Really? Why? She crossed her arms. You could hire anyone. There are hundreds of people who'd kill for a job here. Why me? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, more honest. Because you deserve a second chance, and because I'm selfish enough to want you to take it here. The admission hung between them. I don't understand you, Clara said quietly. Good. That makes two of us. Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. If I stay, she said carefully, I'm not going to be treated differently. I pull my weight. I do the work. I wouldn't expect anything less. And if people talk, they're going to talk anyway. Might as well give you a paycheck while they do. Clara wanted to say no. Wanted to walk away from this strange, complicated man and his too big house and his unsettling ability to see right through her. But she was tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of pretending she didn't need help. Okay, she said. I'll stay. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Relief, maybe? Or satisfaction? Clara couldn't tell. Good. We'll work out the details tomorrow. For now, you should rest. I've been resting for 4 days. Then rest some more. Doctor's orders. This time, Clara did smile. Just a little. She started back toward the guest suite, but Adrian's voice stopped her. Clara. She turned. I'm glad you're staying. He said it simply, honestly, and Clara believed him. The first week back at work was harder than Clara expected. Adrian had offered her an administrative position, assistant to the head of household operations, which was a fancy way of saying she'd be doing paperwork and coordinating schedules and basically learning how the estate actually ran from behind the scenes. It was better than scrubbing floors, but it came with its own challenges. The other staff members didn't know how to act around her. She'd been one of them, then she'd been fired, then she'd almost died, and now she was back in a position that technically outranked half of them. The whispers followed her everywhere. Did you hear she's living in the West Wing now? Blackwood must really like her. I give it 3 months before... Clara learned to tune it out, mostly. Her new supervisor was a woman named Margaret Torres, who'd been running the estate's operations for 15 years and didn't suffer fools. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, and treated Clara with cool professional distance. I don't care how you got this job, Margaret said on Clara's first day. I care whether you can do it. Understand? Yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am, Margaret's fine. Clara nodded. You'll be handling staff schedules, coordinating with vendors, and managing the household accounts. It's a lot of information to absorb. You have questions, you ask. You make a mistake, you fix it. We clear? Clear. Margaret studied her for a moment. You're tougher than you look. I've had practice. Something that might have been approval flickered across Margaret's face. Good. You'll need it. She wasn't wrong. The learning curve was brutal. Clara spent her days buried in spreadsheets and vendor contracts and staff requests, her brain constantly on the edge of overload. At night, she collapsed into bed, a real bed in a real room with a door that locked and heat that worked, and dreamed of numbers. But she was learning, and more than that, she was good at it. 2 weeks in, she caught an accounting error that would have cost the estate thousands. A vendor had been double billing for services they'd only provided once. Margaret had looked at the corrected invoice, then at Clara. "How'd you catch that?" The dates didn't match up. Same service, different line items. "Huh." Margaret made a note. Good eye. It was the closest thing to praise Clara had gotten, and she held on to it. Adrian kept his distance, for the most part. Clara would see him at staff meetings, occasionally in the halls, but he didn't seek her out, didn't play favorites. If anything, he seemed to go out of his way to treat her like any other employee. Clara told herself that was what she wanted. She was lying. 3 weeks after she'd started, Clara was working late in the estate's business office, trying to reconcile a particularly messy set of catering invoices from a party she hadn't attended when Adrian walked in. She looked up, surprised. "Mr. Blackwood, I didn't realize you were still here." "I could say the same." Clara glanced at the clock. It was almost 10. "I'm just finishing up." "You work too much," says the man who's here at 10 p.m. Adrian almost smiled. Fair point. He moved to the window, looking out at the grounds. The estate was beautiful at night, all lit up like something out of a magazine. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Fine. Margaret's a good teacher. She likes you. She has a funny way of showing it. Margaret doesn't waste time on people she doesn't think can handle the job. The fact that she's hard on you means she thinks you're worth the effort." Clara saved her work and closed her laptop. "Is that how you operate too?" "What do you mean?" "Being hard on people you think are worth it." Adrian turned to look at her. "I haven't been hard on you. You've barely spoken to me in 3 weeks. I'm giving you space, letting you find your footing. Or avoiding me." The words came out sharper than Clara intended. Adrian's expression didn't change. "Why would I avoid you?" "I don't know. You tell me." The silence stretched between them, taut and uncomfortable. Finally, Adrian sighed. "I'm trying to do the right thing." "Which is?" "Not making this more complicated than it already is." Clara stood, frustration bubbling up. "You saved my life. You gave me a job. You've been nothing but decent to me. How is that complicated?" "Because I can't stop thinking about you." The admission hit Clara like a physical blow. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, the composed mask slipping. "Every time I see you, I remember finding you in that snow, half dead, and I remember thinking that if I'd been 5 minutes later, you'd be gone. Just gone. And that thought makes me want to burn down everything that led to that moment." Clara couldn't breathe. "So yes," Adrian continued, his voice rough, "I'm keeping my distance. Because the alternative is crossing a line that would make everything harder for you. You work for me. There's a power imbalance. You're still recovering from trauma. There are 1,000 reasons why I should stay away. And if I don't want you to?" The question hung in the air. Adrian looked at her like she'd just asked him to jump off a cliff. "Clara, I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting from you." She moved closer. "I'm capable of making my own decisions. I know that." "Then stop making them for me." They were close now. Close enough that Clara could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between what he wanted and what he thought was right. "I'm not a good man," Adrian said quietly. "I don't need you to be good. I need you to be honest." "I am being honest. I'm telling you that being close to me means danger, means complications, means—" Clara closed the distance and kissed him. For a second, Adrian didn't move, didn't react. Then his hands were in her hair, and he was kissing her back like she was air and he'd been drowning. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was desperate and real, and so far from perfect that Clara's head spun. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he said. "Probably. You could lose your job, your reputation. I've lost worse." Adrian pulled back just enough to look at her. "I'm serious." "So am I." Clara met his eyes. I almost died in that storm. You know what I learned? Life's too short to play it safe. That's a terrible philosophy. Maybe, but it's mine. Adrian laughed, soft and surprised, and Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. We're going to regret this, he said. That's future Clara's problem. What about present Clara? She smiled. Present. Clara is tired of being afraid. Adrian kissed her again, softer this time, and Clara let herself fall into it. Whatever came next, they'd figure it out, together. The first gunshot shattered the east window at 11:47 p.m. Clara was in the library with Adrian when it happened, going over the security reports he'd been showing her, teaching her really, because he'd decided weeks ago that she needed to understand how his world worked if she was going to survive in it. The sound of breaking glass made them both freeze. Then came the second shot. Adrian was moving before Clara could process what was happening. He grabbed her arm, pulling her down behind the heavy oak desk as more gunfire erupted outside. The windows along the corridor exploded inward, spraying glass across the marble floors. Stay down, Adrian said, his voice sharp but steady. He had his phone out, already dialing. Marcus, we're under attack. East wing, multiple shooters. Clara's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. What's happening? They're here for you. The words hit her like ice water. What? Adrian ended the call and moved to the edge of the desk, peering around it. More gunfire. Closer now. Victor made friends. Wrong kind of friends. He's in jail. His friends aren't. Claire's breath came in short, painful bursts. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. People didn't attack estates with guns. This was something out of a movie, not her life. But the bullets punching through the walls were real enough. Adrian grabbed her hand. When I say move, you move. Understand? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Now. They ran. Adrian pulled her through the library doors and into the corridor, keeping low, his body positioned between her and the windows. The sound of breaking glass and splintering wood followed them. Someone was shouting, one of the security team maybe, or one of the attackers. Clara couldn't tell. They made it to the servants' stairwell, the narrow passage that connected the floors away from the main halls. Adrian shoved the door open and practically threw Clara inside, following close behind. The stairwell was dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. Their footsteps echoed against the concrete walls as they descended, Adrian's hand still gripped around hers. Where are we going? Clara gasped. Safe room, basement level. Another explosion rocked the building, not gunfire this time, something bigger. The walls shook, dust raining down from the ceiling. Clara stumbled, and Adrian caught her, keeping her upright. They hit the basement level, and Adrian led her down a corridor she'd never seen before, past storage rooms and mechanical equipment, until they reached a door that looked like it belonged in a bank vault. Adrian pressed his palm against a scanner. The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. The safe room was exactly what it sounded like. Reinforced walls, no windows, stocked with supplies, and enough technology to run a small command center. Monitors lined one wall, showing security feeds from around the estate. Clara stared at the screens. Armed men in tactical gear were moving through the grounds, at least a dozen of them. She could see muzzle flashes, see Adrian's security team engaging them, see the chaos unfolding in real time. Oh God, she whispered. Adrian was already at the monitors, pulling up different angles, his jaw tight. Marcus has them contained to the east grounds. They're not getting inside. They're already inside. We heard them. That was suppressive fire. They're trying to draw us out. He turned to face her, his eyes hard. This isn't random, Clara. They planned this. They know the layout. They know where you'd be. Clara's legs felt weak. She sank into one of the chairs, her hands shaking. Why me? I'm nobody. You're not nobody to me. The words came out flat, matter of fact, but they hit Clara like a freight train. She looked up at him, this man who'd saved her life, who'd upended his entire household for her, who was now standing in a bunker while people tried to kill them both. Victor knows that, Adrian continued. He's been watching, waiting for an opportunity to hurt me. And the easiest way to hurt me is through you. Then send me away, Clara said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Send me somewhere safe, somewhere far from here. You don't need... No. Adrian, I said no. He moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level. You think I'm going to let them win? Let them scare you away? That's what they want. People are dying up there. And they'll die for nothing if you run. His voice softened just slightly. I'm not losing you to them. Not to Victor. Not to anyone. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being insane, that her life wasn't worth all this violence and chaos. But the look in his eyes stopped her. He meant it, every word. A voice crackled through the speaker system mounted on the wall. Mr. Blackwood, this is Marcus. We've pushed them back to the tree line. 3 hostiles down, 4 retreating. No casualties on our side. Adrian stood and pressed the response button. Copy. Keep them pinned. I want prisoners if possible. Understood. Clara stared at him. Prisoners? I need to know who sent them. Who's funding this? Adrian pulled up another screen, this one showing a map of the estate with red dots marking hostile positions. Victor's broke. He couldn't afford this operation. Someone's backing him. Who? That's what I'm going to find out. The gunfire on the monitors was slowing. Adrian's security team, Clara hadn't even known he had a security team that size until tonight, was moving with military precision, flanking the attackers, cutting off their escape routes. It was over in less than 20 minutes. 4 men captured, 3 dead. The rest had fled into the woods, though Adrian's people were tracking them. Clara watched it all unfold on the screens, feeling disconnected from her own body. This was her life now. This was what being close to Adrian Blackwood meant. She should have been terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the fear was something else. Something she didn't have a name for yet. Adrian was back on the comms, coordinating with Marcus, issuing orders like he'd done this 100 times before. Maybe he had. Clara didn't know. There was so much about him she didn't know. Finally, he turned to her. It's clear. We can go back up. Clara shook her head. I don't think I can move. Adrian crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. You're okay. You're safe. People just tried to kill me. I know. Because of you. I know. Clara met his eyes. And you're not going to let me leave. No. She should have been angry, should have screamed at him, told him he was being controlling and paranoid and insane. But she wasn't angry, she was just tired. What happens now, she asked quietly. Now we end this. Adrian helped her to her feet and led her back through the basement, up the stairs, into the main house. The damage was worse than Clara had expected. The east wing looked like a war zone. Shattered windows, bullet holes in the walls, furniture overturned. Staff members were already starting to clean up, their faces pale but determined. Marcus met them in the main hall. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a scar running down his left cheek and the kind of presence that suggested he'd seen worse than tonight. 4 in custody, he reported. Local police are en route, but I figured you'd want to talk to them first. Where are they? East Garage. Adrian nodded and turned to Clara. Go upstairs. Lock the door. I'll come get you when this is done. I want to come with you. Clara, I want to see them. She didn't know where the words came from, but once they were out, she meant them. They came here to kill me. I want to see who they are. Adrian studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Stay behind me. The East Garage had been converted into a makeshift holding area. The 4 captured men were zip-tied to chairs, Marcus's team standing guard. They were young, mid-20s maybe, and they looked scared. Good, Clara thought. They should be scared. Adrian walked up to the closest one, his hands in his pockets, his expression neutral. Who hired you? The man said nothing. I'm going to ask one more time. Then I'm going to stop being polite. Adrian's voice was calm, almost friendly. Somehow that made it more terrifying. Who hired you? Still nothing. Adrian sighed and pulled out his phone. He made a call. Yeah, it's me. I need 4 transfer orders. Maximum security. Tonight. He paused. Because I have 4 attempted murderers who don't want to cooperate, and I'm done playing games. Oh, oh, whoa. One of the men broke. Wait, okay? It was some guy named Hale, Victor Hale. He reached out to us through a contact, said he'd pay 20 grand each if we grabbed the girl. Grabbed? He wanted her alive, said you'd pay to get her back. Clara felt sick. Who's the contact? Adrian pressed. I don't know his name. We just called him Z. He set up the whole thing. Adrian looked at Marcus. Z? Marcus's expression darkened. Zachariah Cross, arms dealer, operates out of the docks. I know who he is. Victor must have reached out from jail, Marcus continued. Cross has connections to half the gangs in the city. If Victor promised him a cut, he's dead. The words were so matter-of-fact that it took Clara a second to process them. Marcus nodded. I'll make the arrangements. Wait, Clara said, her voice cutting through the room. Everyone turned to look at her. You're going to kill him? Yes, Adrian said simply. You can't just... I can and I will. He turned back to the prisoners. Take them to the police, full cooperation. I want Victor charged as an accessory. Marcus gestured to his team, and they started hauling the men out of the garage. Adrian turned to leave, but Clara grabbed his arm. You can't kill someone, she said, her voice shaking. That's murder. It's self-defense. He's not here. He's not pointing a gun at you. Not yet. Adrian's eyes were cold. But he will. Men like Cross don't stop until they're stopped, and I'm not giving him the chance to come after you again. So you're just going to execute him? I'm going to eliminate a threat. Clara stared at him, this man who'd saved her life, who'd been kind to her, who'd shown her a world she'd never imagined existed. And now he was talking about killing someone like he was discussing the weather. This is what my world looks like, Adrian said quietly. This is what it means to be close to me. I told you that from the beginning. You didn't tell me you'd become a murderer. I've always been one. He said it without shame, without hesitation. I've just never had a reason to do it myself before. Clara let go of his arm and stepped back. I don't know you. Yes, you do. Adrian moved closer, his voice softer now. You know exactly who I am. You've known since the night I carried you out of that storm. You just didn't want to see it. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but he wasn't. She'd seen the way people looked at him, the way they moved when he entered a room, the way his own staff treated him with a mixture of respect and fear. Adrian Blackwood wasn't a good man. He'd just been good to her. I'm sending you away, Adrian said, and Clara's breath caught. Somewhere safe, somewhere Cross can't reach you. I thought you said you wouldn't let me leave. I'm not giving you a choice. His jaw was tight. I need to handle this, and I can't do that if I'm worried about you. So you're going, tonight. Where? I have a property upstate, isolated, secure. You'll have protection, everything you need. Clara felt something crack inside her chest. For how long? Until it's done. And then what? Adrian didn't answer. Clara laughed, but it came out broken. You're sending me away so you can go kill people. I'm sending you away so I can keep you alive. Same thing. No, it's not. He reached for her hand and Clara let him take it. I need you to trust me. I don't know if I can. Then don't. Just stay alive long enough for me to finish this. He left before she could respond. Clara stood alone in the garage, surrounded by bullet casings and broken glass, and wondered when her life had turned into something she didn't recognize. An hour later, she was in a car with 2 of Marcus's people, driving north on empty highways while the estate disappeared behind her. Adrian had packed a bag for her, had arranged everything, had kissed her forehead before she left and told her he'd see her soon. She didn't believe him. Men like Adrian Blackwood didn't survive wars they started. They burned bright and fast and left wreckage behind. Clara pressed her face against the window and watched the landscape blur past, feeling like she was being erased. Back at the estate, Adrian was in his office with Marcus, going over intel on Zachariah Cross. Locations, associates, vulnerabilities. He's got protection, Marcus said. Private security, ex-military. This isn't going to be easy. I don't care. Adrian, I don't care. Adrian looked up from the files, his eyes hard. He put a hit on her. He sent armed men to my home. I don't care how hard it is. Marcus nodded slowly. When do you want to move? Tomorrow night. That's fast. It needs to be fast. Every day she's gone is another day something could go wrong. Marcus studied him. You're in love with her. Adrian didn't respond. Does she know? She knows. And? Adrian turned back to the files. And nothing. Get the team ready. I want this done clean. Marcus left, and Adrian sat alone in the dark office, staring at the security feed that showed an empty driveway where Clara's car had disappeared hours ago. He'd made a lot of calls in his life. Business calls. Calls that had ruined competitors, destroyed companies, ended careers. This was different. This was personal. And Zachariah Cross was going to learn what that meant. Across the city, in a warehouse near the docks, Victor Hale sat in a folding chair with his hands cuffed behind his back. Cross paced in front of him, smoking a cigarette, his face shadowed in the dim light. They took 4 of my guys, Cross said. 4. And you promised this would be simple. It should have been, Victor snapped. You said your people were professionals. They are. But you didn't tell me Blackwood had a private army. I didn't know. Cross grabbed Victor by the collar and yanked him forward. You didn't know. You didn't plan. You wasted my time and my resources on some revenge fantasy, and now Blackwood's going to come for both of us. Then run, Victor spat. Get out of the city. I don't care. Oh, I'm running. Cross let go and stepped back. But you're not. Victor's eyes widened. What? You're the bait. Cross smiled, cold and sharp. Blackwood wants blood. I'm going to give him yours and hope it buys me enough time to disappear. You can't. I already did. Cross turned and walked toward the warehouse exit. 2 of his men stayed behind, watching Victor with dead eyes. Wait! Victor shouted. You can't just leave me here! Cross! Cross! The warehouse door slammed shut. Victor sat in the dark, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and realized for the first time in his life that he'd miscalculated. Badly. Somewhere upstate, Clara lay awake in a bed that wasn't hers, in a house that didn't feel real, listening to the wind howl outside. The guards had done a sweep. Everything was secure. She was safe. She didn't feel safe. She felt like she was waiting. For what? She didn't know. But something was coming, something that would change everything, again. 3 days passed like years. Clara spent them in the upstate house, a modern fortress of glass and steel tucked into the mountains where cell service barely existed, and the only sounds were wind and silence. The guards rotated shifts but never spoke to her beyond necessary pleasantries. She had books, a television, access to anything she could want, except answers. Adrian hadn't called, hadn't sent word. The guards claimed they didn't know anything, and Clara believed them. Whatever was happening back in the city, it was happening without her. She hated it. On the 4th morning, she woke to find Marcus sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee like he'd been there for hours. Clara stopped in the doorway, her heart jumping. What happened? It's over. 2 words. That's all he gave her. Clara moved closer, gripping the back of a chair. What does that mean? Where's Adrian? Handling the cleanup. Marcus set his mug down. Cross is dead. So are most of his people. The ones who aren't are in federal custody. Clara's knees went weak. She sat down hard. And Victor? Alive. Barely. Marcus's expression was unreadable. He's facing multiple charges, conspiracy, attempted murder. He'll die in prison. Did Adrian... She couldn't finish the sentence. Kill Cross? Yes. Marcus said it like he was reporting the weather. Justified self-defense, legally speaking. Cross fired first, Adrian fired last. Clara put her head in her hands. She'd known it would happen. Had known from the moment Adrian sent her away that he was going to do exactly what he'd promised. But knowing and hearing were different things. He wants you to come home, Marcus said. Clara looked up. Home? The estate. He's waiting for you. She should have felt relieved. Should have felt something other than this hollow ache in her chest. What if I don't want to go back? Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then I'll take you wherever you want to go. No questions asked. Clara believed him. Marcus seemed like the kind of man who kept his word. She thought about it, really thought about it. She could leave, could disappear. Start over somewhere far away from Adrian Blackwood and his world of violence and control. She could be free. But freedom wasn't what she wanted anymore. Take me back, Clara said quietly. The drive took 4 hours. Clara watched the landscape change from mountains to suburbs to city, her stomach tightening with every mile. Marcus didn't try to make conversation, and she was grateful for that. When they finally pulled through the estate gates, Clara's breath caught. The east wing had been repaired, the windows replaced, the bullet holes patched. If she hadn't known what happened, she never would have guessed the place had been a war zone less than a week ago. Adrian was waiting on the front steps. He looked tired, older somehow, even though only days had passed. There was a bandage on his left hand and a bruise along his jaw that hadn't been there before. The car stopped, and Clara got out before Marcus could open the door for her. Adrian didn't move, just watched her walk toward him, his expression carefully neutral. They stood there for a moment, 3 feet apart, the space between them feeling like miles. "You came back," Adrian said finally. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Clara, did you kill him yourself?" The question hung in the air between them. "Yes." Clara nodded slowly. She didn't know what she'd expected. Maybe some kind of excuse, some justification, but Adrian didn't offer one. "He had a gun to Victor's head when we found them," Adrian continued, his voice flat. "Was going to execute him, use it as leverage. I didn't give him the chance." "So you shot him?" "Yes." "And you don't feel bad about it?" Adrian's eyes met hers. "No." Clara laughed, but it came out broken. "You're a monster." "I know. And you don't care." "I care about you." He said it simply, honestly. Everything else is just noise. Clara wanted to be angry, wanted to scream at him, tell him he was insane, that caring about someone didn't justify murder. But she was so tired of being angry. "I should leave," she said instead. "I should get as far away from you as possible." "You should, but I won't." Adrian's expression cracked, just slightly. "Why not?" "Because I'm as broken as you are." The words came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep inside her. "Because I spent 3 months in that house terrified of Victor, of losing my job, of ending up on the street, and you saved me, not just from the storm, from all of it. That doesn't mean I love you." The words stopped him cold. Clara hadn't meant to say them, hadn't even realized she was going to until they were already out. But now that they were, she couldn't take them back, and she didn't want to. "I love you," she said again, steadier this time. "Even though you terrify me, even though your world is violent and dangerous and wrong, I love you." Adrian closed the distance between them in 2 steps and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't sweet. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like relief. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his hands framing her face. "I'm not a good man," he said quietly. "I know. I'll hurt people who threaten you. I won't apologize for it. I know. And I'll never let you go." Clara smiled, sad and true. "I know that too." They stood there on the steps while the sun set behind them, 2 broken people holding on to each other like lifelines. Inside, the house was quiet. Most of the staff had been given time off after the attack. The ones who remained moved like ghosts, giving Adrian and Clara space. They ended up in the library where it had all started 4 nights ago. Someone had cleaned up the glass, replaced the windows, removed any evidence that violence had ever touched this room. Clara sat on the couch, tucking her legs under her, while Adrian poured them both drinks. Whiskey for him, wine for her. "What happens now?" she asked. Adrian handed her the glass and sat beside her. "Victor goes to trial. Cross's organization is finished. The men who attacked us are cooperating with the police." "That's not what I meant." He looked at her. "I know." Clara took a sip of wine, letting the warmth spread through her. "I can't go back to being a maid. I wasn't going to ask you to. And I can't just sit around this house doing nothing." What do you want to do? The question surprised her. No one had ever asked her that before. Clara thought about it, really thought about it. I want to learn about business, about how your world works. I want to be useful. You are useful. I mean really useful, not just someone you have to protect. She set her glass down. If I'm going to be part of this life, I need to understand it, all of it. Adrian was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. All right, all right. I'll teach you everything, the business, the contacts, the strategies. He paused. It won't be easy. Nothing about this has been easy. He almost smiled at that. Over the next weeks, Adrian kept his word. He brought Clara into meetings, showed her contracts, explained deals. The learning curve was brutal, but Clara absorbed it like she was starving. She learned that Adrian's wealth came from real estate development, but his power came from information. He knew things about people, their secrets, their weaknesses, and he used that knowledge like currency. She learned that most of his business associates feared him more than they respected him, that he'd built his empire on calculated risks and ruthless efficiency. She learned that the man who'd carried her out of a blizzard was the same man who'd once bankrupted a competitor for undercutting him on a deal. And somehow, knowing all of it, she loved him more. Not because he was good, but because with her, he tried to be. One evening, about 6 weeks after the attack, they were in Adrian's office reviewing acquisition proposals when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I need to take this. Clara nodded and turned back to the documents while Adrian stepped into the hallway. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the office door hadn't closed all the way, and Adrian's voice carried. I told you not to call this number. No, the answer is still no. I don't care what the board thinks, because she's not negotiable. Clara's attention sharpened. My personal life is not up for discussion, Adrian continued, his voice hardening. If they have a problem with it, they can find a new CEO. Yes, I'm serious. Then let them try. He ended the call and stood there for a moment before coming back inside. Clara looked up. Everything okay? Fine. Adrian. He sighed and sat down across from her. The board thinks you're a liability. They want me to distance myself from you publicly. For the company's image. Clara's stomach dropped. What did you tell them? That they can go to hell? Despite everything, she laughed. You can't talk to your board like that. I can do whatever I want. I own controlling interest. Still, Clara. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. I didn't fight to keep you alive just to hide you in the shadows because some executives in suits think you're not good enough. They might be right. They're not. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that love was enough to bridge the gap between who she was and who she'd need to become to exist in his world. But doubt was a persistent thing. What if I embarrass you? She asked quietly. You won't. What if I make mistakes? Then you'll learn from them. What if... Adrian reached across the desk and took her hand. What if you stop trying to find reasons this won't work and just let it? Clara stared at their joined hands. His were scarred from years of fighting battles she was only beginning to understand. Hers were still soft, unmarked, belonging to someone who'd only recently stopped being afraid of everything. But they fit together. Somehow, impossibly, they fit. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay. 2 months after that, Adrian called a board meeting. Clara wasn't invited, but she watched from his office via video feed as he stood at the head of the conference table and addressed 15 of the most powerful people in the city. I'm announcing my engagement, he said without preamble. The room went silent. To Clara Bennett. Some of you have expressed concerns about her background, her qualifications, her suitability. Adrian's voice was cold, clinical. I don't care. The engagement is not up for debate. Neither is her role in this company moving forward. One of the older board members spoke up. Adrian, we understand you have personal feelings, but the shareholders answer to me, as do all of you. He let that sink in. Claire will be taking a position as my executive assistant effective immediately. She'll have full access to all company operations and my complete authority to act on my behalf. Another voice, a woman this time. That's highly irregular. So is attacking a board member's personal life. Yet, here we are. The woman fell silent. If anyone has an objection, Adrian continued, you're welcome to resign. I'll have your shares bought out by end of business tomorrow. No one moved. Good. Meeting adjourned. Clara watched him walk out of the conference room, her heart pounding. He'd just put his entire business reputation on the line for her. She met him at the elevator. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. Adrian, they needed to understand. He pressed the button for his floor. You're not some temporary distraction. You're permanent, and they're going to treat you accordingly. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in. Clara looked at their reflection in the polished brass. Adrian in his suit, every inch the powerful executive. Her in a dress she still wasn't quite comfortable wearing, trying to look like she belonged. They didn't look like they fit, but they did. When did you decide, Pune, she asked, that you wanted to marry me? Adrian was quiet for a moment. The night I found you in the snow. I didn't know it then. But looking back, I think I decided the moment I picked you up. That's insane. Probably. We barely knew each other. I knew enough. The elevator reached their floor and they stepped out into the empty hallway. I'm scared, Clara admitted. Of what? Of losing myself in all this? Of becoming someone I don't recognize? Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. You won't. How do you know? Because I fell in love with who you are, not who I could turn you into. He touched her face, gentle in a way that still surprised her. You're allowed to change, grow, become stronger, but you're also allowed to stay exactly who you've always been. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. What if I'm not strong enough for this? You walked 3 miles through a blizzard and survived. You lived through an armed attack. You looked me in the eye and called me a monster, and then said you loved me anyway. Adrian smiled, soft and real. You're stronger than you think. She wanted to believe him. Maybe she was starting to. That night, they had dinner in the estate's smaller dining room, just the two of them. No staff, no interruptions, just food and wine and conversation that felt almost normal. Almost. I need to tell you something, Clara said as they were finishing dessert. Adrian set down his fork. All right, I'm not doing this because I need you. She chose her words carefully. I'm doing this because I want to. There's a difference. I know. Do you? Because sometimes I think you see me as something you saved, something you need to protect. You're not wrong, Adrian admitted. I do want to protect you, but that doesn't mean I think you're weak. Then what do you think I am? He considered the question. Brave, stubborn, smarter than you give yourself credit for. He paused. Mine. The possessiveness in that last word should have bothered her. It didn't. Yours, Clara agreed. She stood and walked around the table, sitting in his lap, her arms around his neck. Adrian pulled her closer, his hands settling on her waist. I'm going to make mistakes, Clara said. In business. In this life. I'm going to embarrass you sometimes. Probably. And you're going to be controlling and overprotective and impossible. Definitely. But we're going to make this work. It wasn't a question. Adrian kissed her, slow and deep, and when they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Yeah, he said quietly. We are. Outside, snow began to fall. Soft and gentle this time, nothing like the storm that had nearly killed her all those months ago. Clara watched it through the window, safe and warm in the arms of a man who'd turned her entire world upside down. And for the first time since that Christmas Eve, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. The first year wasn't easy. Clara had expected that, but knowing something intellectually and living through it were different animals entirely. She made mistakes. Lots of them. In her third week as Adrian's executive assistant, she accidentally forwarded a confidential acquisition proposal to the wrong email chain. Adrian had to spend 2 hours doing damage control while Clara sat in his office feeling like she might throw up. It happens, he'd said afterward, but she could see the tension in his jaw. It shouldn't happen, not with something this important. Then learn from it. Set up a verification system. Triple check recipients before you hit send. She had, and she never made that mistake again. But there were others. She froze during her first board presentation, forgot the name of a major investor at a gala, and once called a Japanese business partner by the wrong honorific, nearly derailing a multi-million-dollar deal. Each time, Adrian stood beside her, not covering for her mistakes, but letting her own them and fix them. "You're not going to be perfect," he told her one night after a particularly brutal day where she'd mixed up two different contract terms in front of the legal team. "No one is, but you're going to be better tomorrow than you were today." Clara had cried that night, not in front of anyone, but alone in the bathroom with the water running so no one would hear. The weight of everything pressed down on her sometimes. The expectations, the scrutiny, the constant feeling that she was one mistake away from proving everyone right, that she didn't belong in this world. But she kept showing up, and slowly, imperceptibly, things began to shift. 6 months in, she successfully negotiated a partnership deal with a commercial developer that Adrian had been chasing for a year. Her approach had been different from his, less aggressive, more collaborative, and it had worked. Adrian had looked at the signed contract, then at her, and smiled in a way that made her forget every sleepless night she'd spent preparing. "You're good at this," he'd said. "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not. I always knew you would be." 9 months in, one of the board members who'd been most vocal about her unsuitability approached her after a meeting. "I owe you an apology," the man said. His name was Richard Chen, and he'd built his fortune in tech before moving into real estate. "I judged you unfairly." Clara had been gathering her notes, and she looked up, surprised. "Mr. Chen, you've proven yourself. More than that, you've brought something to this company that we were lacking." "What's that?" "Perspective. The ability to see past the numbers to the people behind them." He paused. "Adrian's lucky to have you. We all are." Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. But later, when she told Adrian about the conversation, he'd pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "Told you," he murmured. "Told me what?" "That you were stronger than you thought." The wedding planning started around the 1-year mark. Clara had assumed it would be a massive affair, hundreds of guests, elaborate decorations, the kind of society wedding that filled magazines and made headlines. But when they sat down to actually plan it, Adrian had other ideas. "What do you want?" he asked. They were in the library again, the room that had become their unofficial planning space for everything important. "What do I want?" Claire repeated. "It's not just about what I want." "Yes, it is. Adrian, you have business associates, investors, people you need to invite. I don't need to do anything." He set down the wedding planner's portfolio they'd been reviewing. "This is our wedding, not a networking event." Clara looked at him. "You really don't care about any of that. I care about you. The rest is just noise." So they planned something smaller, more intimate. 75 guests instead of 300. The estate instead of some massive venue. Winter instead of spring, because Clara had decided she wanted to reclaim the season that had almost killed her. "Are you sure?" Adrian had asked when she suggested December. "I'm sure. I want to look at snow and not feel afraid anymore." The preparations took on a life of their own. Clara's role in the company had grown enough that she had actual responsibilities now, and balancing work with wedding planning was its own kind of chaos. But it was good chaos. The kind that came from building something rather than running from something. 3 weeks before the wedding, Clara got a call from a number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Clara Bennett?" The voice was unfamiliar, male, rough around the edges. "Who is this?" "My name's James Hale, Victor's brother." Clara's blood went cold. She was in her office. She had an office now, right down the hall from Adrian's, and she stood up, her hand tightening on the phone. "What do you want?" To apologize. That wasn't what she'd expected. "I don't understand. My brother—" James paused, and Clara heard him take a breath. "What he did to you was wrong. Unforgivable. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in our family thinks like he does." Clara sat back down slowly. "Why are you calling me?" "Because Victor's trial is next month, and I'm going to testify against him. You're his brother." I'm also not blind to what kind of man he is. James's voice was tired. He's been cruel his whole life. I just never thought he'd go this far. Clara didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to hang up, to pretend this conversation wasn't happening. But another part, the part that had spent months learning to navigate complicated situations with grace, knew that wasn't the answer. "Thank you for calling," she said finally. "I appreciate you telling me. For what it's worth, I hope you and Mr. Blackwood are happy." James hung up before Clara could respond. She sat there for a long time, staring at her phone, thinking about cruelty and family and the strange ways people tried to make amends for things they hadn't done themselves. When she told Adrian about it that evening, he'd been quiet. "Do you believe him?" he asked. "I think so. He sounded genuine." "That doesn't mean he is." "I know." Clara curled up next to him on the couch. "But I don't think he's trying to hurt us. I think he's just trying to live with having a brother like Victor." Adrian wrapped his arm around her. "You're more forgiving than I am. Someone has to be." He almost laughed at that. The trial happened 2 weeks before the wedding. Clara didn't attend, but Adrian did, along with Marcus and the legal team. It lasted 3 days. Victor Hale was found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted kidnapping, a dozen other charges that added up to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Adrian came home after the sentencing and found Clara in the library reading. "It's done," he said. Clara closed her book. "How do you feel?" "I don't know." He sat down beside her, loosening his tie. "I thought I'd feel satisfied, vindicated, something." "But you don't?" "I just feel tired." Clara took his hand. "It's over now, really over." "Yeah, Adrian squeezed her fingers. "It is." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past year settling around them like dust. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked quietly. "Everything that happened because of me?" Adrian turned to look at her. "No, never. Not even once." He cupped her face with his free hand. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara, even with everything else. Especially with everything else." She believed him. The wedding took place on December 20th, exactly 1 year and 4 days after the night Clara had nearly died in the snow. The estate had been transformed, white flowers everywhere, roses and lilies and orchids that filled the air with fragrance, candles in every window, string lights woven through the trees outside so the whole property glowed. Clara stood in one of the upstairs bedrooms looking at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her dress was simple, elegant. The kind of thing she never would have imagined wearing a year ago. Her hair was pulled back, soft and romantic, and someone had done her makeup so perfectly she looked like a version of herself from a dream. "You look beautiful." Clara turned. Sarah Mitchell, one of the other assistants who'd become her closest friend over the past months, stood in the doorway. "I look terrified," Clara corrected. "You look both." Sarah came in and adjusted Clara's veil. "That's normal." "Is it?" "Getting married is scary, especially when you're marrying someone like Adrian Blackwood." Clara laughed despite herself. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're marrying a man who once made a competitor's stock drop 30% in a single day, just to prove a point." Sarah stepped back, examining her work. "But he also looks at you like you hung the moon, so I'd say you're even." There was a knock at the door. Marcus poked his head in. "They're ready for you." Clara's stomach flipped. Sarah squeezed her hand. "You've got this." The walk down the main staircase was the longest of Clara's life. Every step felt weighted, significant. The same staircase where she'd carried champagne as a maid, where she'd walked on eggshells, afraid of making a mistake. Now she was descending it as a bride. The ceremony was being held in the main hall, the one with the massive fireplace and windows that overlooked the grounds. 75 people stood as she entered, but Clara only saw one. Adrian stood at the front, in a suit that probably cost more than Clara used to make in a year, and his expression when he saw her made her forget how to breathe. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world, like she'd always been the only person in the world. Clara made it down the aisle without tripping, which felt like a minor miracle given how shaky her legs were. Adrian took her hand when she reached him, and his fingers were steady and warm. "Hi," he said quietly. Hi. The officiant began speaking, but Clara barely heard the words. She was too focused on Adrian's face, on the way he was looking at her like he couldn't quite believe she was real. The vows were traditional, simple, but when Adrian said, "I do," his voice cracked just slightly, and Claire realized he was as overwhelmed as she was. When it was her turn, she looked him in the eye and said the words without hesitation. "I do." The kiss was soft, gentle, nothing like the desperate, fierce kisses they usually shared. This was a promise. The reception was everything a wedding should be. Good food, better wine, speeches that made people laugh and cry. Marcus gave a toast that was surprisingly emotional for a man who usually showed all the warmth of a granite statue. "I've known Adrian for 15 years, he said, raising his glass, and in all that time I've never seen him happy. Satisfied, maybe. Successful, definitely, but not happy." He looked at Clara. "Until you." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Adrian's hand found hers under the table and squeezed. Later, when they had their first dance, Clara rested her head against Adrian's chest and let herself just exist in the moment. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked. "That I almost missed all of this." "What do you mean? If I'd given up in that storm, if I'd just let the cold take me." She pulled back to look at him. "I would have missed everything." Adrian's expression tightened. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Think about that night like that, like it was some kind of choice." "But it was. I chose to keep walking, even when I didn't think I could. And I chose to find you." Adrian's voice was rough. "We both chose. That's what matters." They swayed together, surrounded by people and music and light, and Clara thought about choices, about the small ones that led to big ones, about dropping a vase and losing a job and walking into a storm, about being found, about learning to love someone who wasn't good but was good to her, about becoming someone stronger than she'd ever imagined she could be. The night wound down eventually. Guests departed with hugs and well wishes. The staff cleaned up with quiet efficiency. And finally, Clara and Adrian were alone in the library again, still in their wedding clothes, exhausted and happy. "We did it," Clara said. "We did. Now what?" Adrian smiled. "Now we live." It sounded simple when he said it like that, and maybe it was. 6 months later, Clara stood in the north parlor, the room where everything had started. The vase had been replaced, of course. A different one. Similar in style, but not the same. Never the same. She'd asked Adrian not to replace it at first, had wanted the empty space to remain as a reminder. But he'd been right when he said they needed to move forward, not backward. Clara touched the new vase gently, running her fingers over the smooth porcelain. "You okay?" She turned. Adrian stood in the doorway, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up. He'd been in meetings all afternoon. "I'm good," Clara said. "Just thinking." "About?" "About how much has changed." Adrian came into the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." And she meant it. The girl who'd been thrown into a storm no longer existed. In her place was a woman who'd learned to navigate treacherous waters, who'd made mistakes and owned them, who'd fallen in love with a dangerous man and somehow made it work. She wasn't perfect. Neither was Adrian. Their life together wasn't some fairy tale where everything worked out smoothly, but it was theirs, built on survival and choice and stubborn refusal to give up on each other. That was worth more than perfection. That was worth everything. Outside, snow began to fall. Clara watched it through the window, safe in Adrian's arms, and smiled. She wasn't afraid of winter anymore. She'd walked through the worst of it and come out the other side. And now, finally, she was home.